The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is one of the most iconic horror movies of all time. Many fans consider it a prototype for slasher movies that would follow, like Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. And while it definitely is a prototype for what would become the slasher genre, I actually think it has more in common with a movie like Mad Max than the slasher movies that followed. So, after that disturbing text crawl and the disturbing sight of two bodies, the film continues with an ominous radio broadcast set to a montage of solar flares, which seems to immediately signal that there's something wrong, that there's just something cosmically happening to the people in the movie. And that's later supported by Pam, who reads from her astrology book and begins to talk about Saturn and how Saturn's in retrograde, and it basically just is not going to be a good day. And while I could talk about the cosmic horror aspects, and perhaps I will in a future video, I'm here to talk about the social commentary, and a lot of that comes from the radio broadcast and the opening credits. Unfortunately, it might be hard to hear over the sound of the very disturbing score performed by Wayne Bell and Toby Hooper, which is very ominous itself, like a low, droning hum. It's not traditional music, and I think that's part of what builds the atmosphere and sets the mood. But if you're able to find a copy of the dialogue or just listen closely, you can hear some very bizarre circumstances that are happening, not just in Texas, but across the United States and even other locations in the world. So, to demonstrate, here are a few events mentioned by the radio announcer, and honestly, they're more disturbing than what we see in the movie. Here we go with some direct quotes. Quote, a young man reportedly angered by local television blackout of a sports event jumped from the 10th story window of his apartment. A second man allegedly threatened to leap to his death from the same window but was restrained by police. End quote. Quote, a 16-story building under construction in downtown Atlanta collapsed today, killing at least 29 persons. The engineering firm responsible for the structural design of the building could offer no explanation for the collapse. Spokesmen for the construction firm say there's no logical reason for the collapse and suspect sabotage. End quote. And this is, in my opinion, the creepiest excerpt. Quote, police in Dallas have arrested a young couple today after complaints by neighbors led them to discover the 18-month-old daughter of the couple chained in the attic of a dilapidated house. End quote. So, like I said, there's a lot of stuff to unpack in the opening radio broadcast. There's also references to a cholera outbreak, oil storage fires, and even governments in South America battling over oil-rich land in the Amazons. So that's why I consider it a lot closer to something like the original Mad Max than most of the slasher movies that have followed. And unfortunately, even most of the Texas Chain Saw Massacre movies that follow. Though I do think there's a through line from parts 2 through 4 in which, in some ways, they carry a lot of the social commentary, and in particular, the conspiracy that the first movie seems to imply is going on. For example, law enforcement seems to be pinning the grave robbing that the hitchhiker is doing in the opening of the film on a crime ring on the West Coast. And it seems to imply that there's something bigger going on. And it goes beyond just the radio broadcast. For example, when our protagonists go to the gas station, not only is there a fuel shortage, they have no gas, but they go to use the Coke machine, and this is the biggest red flag that there's just something wrong with America. The Coke machine's broken. And if that isn't the greatest piece of commentary or satire, then I don't know what is. And the sequels, or the original three sequels, try to carry this on to some extent. Texas Chain Saw Massacre 2 seems to go in a different direction with its commentary, where it focuses more on Reaganomics and consumerism. Fair enough. Leatherface, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre 3, ultimately cut out any kind of commentary in favor of being more of a traditional slasher movie. But in the earlier draft of the screenplay, there is an ending in which Michelle goes to a sheriff's office and the sheriff removes a chainsaw from underneath his desk, revealing he's connected with the family in some way and that there is a larger conspiracy going on. And we see this evolve into eventually the plot for Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, which was directed by original Chainsaw co-writer Kim Henkel, and he tackled a lot of interesting concepts with this movie, many of which didn't go over well with fans. But for example, we see the Illuminati make an appearance, or at least a group that believes they're the Illuminati. They focus more on humor and comedy, and I think that's why it didn't go as well with fans. So you have the secret society conspiracy aspect, but they tried to blend it in with like a horror movie commentary. So now the Illuminati shows up to criticize Leatherface and his family and their inability to be scary in the 90s. And that's pretty brilliant in some ways, but obviously mainstream audiences weren't interested in that kind of thing, and it just completely dropped the dark, foreboding tone that the original movie took with that idea. And Kim Henkel later reused some of those themes for Butcher Boys, aka Bone Boys, which started out as a Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot, and due to rights issues and the production of Texas Chainsaw 3D, it was turned into its own thing. But it is nice to see that Hinkle got to explore some of those ideas a little further. And while the movie still isn't a mainstream hit, much like Next Generation, I have a soft spot in my heart for it. So I do enjoy these original 4 to 5 movies and what they're trying to say. Of course, none of them say it quite as well as the original film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think with each additional movie, we get further and further away from that initial commentary, and fans might not realize it or care to even watch the original movie because of that. But I think for those who do or pay a little extra attention, there's something really cool about getting to discover this whole other layer to what seems like a pretty straightforward slasher or slasher prototype. And I think not only should fans take a closer look at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but that might be good advice for future filmmakers involved with the franchise who should maybe take a look at what Kim Henkel and Tobe Hooper were trying to do and learn a thing or two. And ultimately, I think what they were trying to say is that Leatherface and his family are far from the scariest things in this universe. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and leave a comment down below. How did you interpret the social commentary in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or its sequels? And if you'd like to further support the channel, there is a Brain Mutant Patreon with both free and paid tiers, so please check that out, and I'll have more content soon. As always, obey the brain.